Welcome to Survivor Scale, the show where we break down all of horror's greatest characters to see who has the skills, experience, and mentality to survive any situation, and the ones that don't. I'm H2Mass, and today I'm ranking every main character in James Wan's 2004 torture porn terror, Saw. Known for its great acting, intensity, and plot twists, the film has firmly established itself as one of the most iconic horror movies ever made, spawning a franchise that is pushed well beyond the bounds of the original, with gore, guts, and gratuitousness that would make even a surgeon blush. The first film, though, really upholds its name, heavily emphasizing saws. The story follows Adam and Lawrence, two men chained to one of the most disgusting rooms I've ever seen, and who must use whatever they can find in order to escape, all while trying to outmaneuver a killer.
Technically speaking, he's not really a murderer. He never killed anyone.
Shut up! He's a murderer. Don't give me any of that. He doesn't actually kill them, whatever nonsense. He puts them into the trap and they kill them. No.
Finds ways for his victims to kill themselves.
Shut up! He's a murderer. Anyway, as Adam and Lawrence try to find a way out, we learn more about the Jigsaw Killer and the ways in which his traps have killed his victims, all as a means of testing their will to survive. However, you'd think a film that throws its protagonists into such extreme life or death scenarios to gauge their survival instinct would produce some of the most resilient and capable characters horror has to offer. But is this actually true? Well, let's find out. Beginning the list, we have Adam, a man who... Wait, what do you do again?
You wanna know what I do? I get paid to take pictures of rich guys like you who go to seedy out-of-the-way motels to fuck their secretaries.
Alright, I'm not rich, but thanks for reminding me. Unlike many horror movies where characters are thrust into life-threatening situations and must act quickly to survive, Saw initially gives Adam and Lawrence time to assess their situation, allowing them to more carefully consider their options. Despite being a bit of a loudmouth, Adam displays an ability to withhold seemingly important information. During the early portion of the film, both Adam and Lawrence talk to one another to determine how and why they ended up trapped in this room.
We need to talk. We need to think.
Adam, though, is careful not to mention key pieces of information in order to maintain an advantage over Lawrence, showcasing his awareness of and ability to capitalize on it, something that is often crucial in other horror movies, particularly those where the danger of the situation is not explicitly stated or even shown, so the victims must discover it for themselves. A bit later, he reaches into the toilet. Oh look, he's got doo-doo on his hands.
No solids.
And finds a bag containing 2 hacksaws. He then starts trying to cut through his chain without throwing the other saw to Lawrence. However, once Lawrence asks for the other hacksaw,
Mind passing me the other one?
Adam throws it off to the side, so Lawrence has to lose sight of him to retrieve it. In this moment of ignorance, Adam hides the bag. Now, I'm not sure if he intentionally distracts Lawrence with such a poor throw so he'd have a better opportunity to hide the bag, but if he does, then it showcases his forward-thinking ability and priority to maintain control. However, his hiding technique is a bit poor because it's pretty clear that he's looking at something, even though he's got it in the tub. Just one of his hands is down and he's looking right at it. Don't you know that I can see you? But somehow Gordon doesn't recognize this. Later, in a flashback, we see how Jigsaw kidnapped Adam. When he detects an intruder after his apartment's power goes out, Adam uses his camera to see in quick flashes, showing some adaptability, taking advantage of his resources to give him more information. However, he probably should have told somebody that someone had invaded his home, especially after seeing the puppet. Now, I'm not entirely sure why he doesn't try to leave once he realizes someone else is, or at least was, inside his house. But regardless, this suggests a dangerous level of courage. Or stupidity. Perhaps he wanted to seem tough rather than making a safer decision, something that could certainly harm him in more dangerous situations. Now, this may not negatively affect him in many other scenarios, but he's also a bad liar.
Stop the lies! You're a liar!
Unable to give a reason as to how he knew to turn the lights off to find another clue.
How did you know to turn off the lights?
Instinct.
Instinct.
Yeah.
You're a terrible liar.
Sure, he had been given a hint from the bag he had hidden earlier, but he didn't know turning the lights off would work, and really only thought to do so once Lawrence said the word dark.
Well, then don't keep me in the dark about what you're thinking.
He should have recognized that Lawrence would question his decision to turn off the lights, or at least find it suspicious. I mean, he could have just told him the truth and said that Lawrence's words gave him an idea. Adam displays this deficiency again when he reminds Lawrence of his wife and daughter being in danger, despite knowing that the way for Lawrence to prevent their deaths is to kill Adam.
Your wife and kid are out there. He's got them, too. He could be doing anything to them right now. You thinking about that?
He essentially incentivizes Lawrence to act against them, putting himself in even more danger than he was already in. All of this makes me seriously question Adam's awareness of other people's perspectives and how they affect him, something that could certainly harm him in situations where other people have power. Now, while Saw does give its characters time to carefully plan their actions, it eventually puts them into high-pressure situations as well, forcing Adam to make quick but important decisions. For example, in a quick moment, he decides to attack and manages to fight off Zep, even after getting shot. This was crucial because not only does it keep Lawrence alive, his only chance of getting out, but it also gives Lawrence even more of a reason to tell others where Adam is if he does escape, especially after all the negative interactions that had happened between them.
I'll bring someone back. I promise.
Here, he displays a primal rage, a climax of emotion so extreme that Lawrence has to intervene to stop him. On one hand, such an intense outburst could prove useful in desperate situations and demonstrates Adam's willingness to kill if need be, but it could also cause him to act haphazardly and make poor decisions. With all that said, I think Adam is a much more likely survivor than his appearance and actions may imply at first glance. He's pretty adaptable, situationally aware, and surprisingly physical, so I'm placing Adam in B tier, with his strongest performances coming in folk horror movies and his weakest performances coming in zombie movies. Next up, we have Lawrence's wife. Though she's only in the movie for a few minutes, she performs very well with her limited time. During Lawrence's tenure in captivity, she finds herself battling with an intruder, Zep. Unfortunately, she loses this first encounter and ends up bound to a bed frame. Later though, while Zep is out of sight, she manages to break free of her constraints, perhaps demonstrating a mastery of escape tactics, or Zep's ineptitude. Like, dude, come on, tie some better knots. After breaking free, she notices him approaching the room and pretends to still be tied up so she can get the jump on him. Here, she showcases a sense of caution and patience, recognizing that she shouldn't immediately try to run or fight once she gets free, but should instead try to find the most opportune time to do so. And she does! After Zep puts the phone to her head to talk to her husband, she uses this moment of distraction to take the gun. However, she makes some crucial mistakes. Firstly, she stands much too close to Zep after taking the weapon, making it far more likely that any lunging attack from him would be successful. She also gets distracted when her dumbass daughter says, and Zep wrestles the gun away from her as a result. All of this could have been prevented if she had simply pulled the trigger when she had the opportunity to do so. Despite Zep having just tried to murder her, she doesn't display a willingness to kill, not shooting or even maiming Zep when she has the chance, and while her daughter was sitting just 3 feet away. I mean, if she's not willing to kill him in this situation, I'm not sure there's one she would, making me seriously doubt her chances in similar scenarios. I feel that this hesitation, especially when paired with her lack of caution by not stepping farther away when she gained the upper hand, would get her killed very often in other horror movies. It's unfortunate because if she had shown more willingness to kill Zep, she'd have at least been A tier, maybe even S. She displayed great resilience and tenacity in her brief screen time, and I think it would have transferred well to a lot of horror situations. Still though, despite having room to improve, she performed very well, and in films where she doesn't have to protect her daughter, would likely perform even better. With that said, I'm putting her in B tier, with her strongest performances coming in zombie movies and her weakest performances coming in home invasion movies. Next up, we have one of the Saw series' most noteworthy characters, Amanda Young. However, since I'm only including her performance in this film, we don't have much to work with as she's not in the movie that long, but I thought it'd be wrong to leave her out completely. In her brief time, she finds herself victim to Jigsaw's most notorious killing machine.
Think of it like a reverse bear trap.
Here, she must overcome her addiction by disemboweling her drug dealer and finding a key hidden inside his stomach. Oh, and she's only given 60 seconds. When cutting through the man's stomach though, her technique is a bit inefficient. She only has 60 seconds to find the key, but she acts like she's mashing potatoes or churning butter rather than trying to open up a body. Now, while it doesn't cause her to fail the test, this kind of abrasiveness may suggest a lack of control or an inability to keep calm and think quickly or effectively under pressure. Mashing his inside so violently would likely make it much more difficult to find the key, so this kind of exaggerated movement could have kept her from success. Ultimately though, she does manage to find the key, insinuating that she may have good tactile skills or the ability to see small details. If that were me, I'd have spent 60 minutes just looking for the key if it were covered in all that blood and guts. I also have to give her credit for finding the lock so quickly and actually putting the key inside without dropping or fumbling it around or even removing the trap before it activated. Many other victims in later films often fail at this step, perhaps due to collapsing under pressure, something Amanda does well in avoiding. Now, while she did manage to become the first survivor of a jigsaw trap, her predicament was much less difficult than those of the previous victims. Whereas their games required a far greater display of dexterity and willpower, having to walk on broken glass with a small flame while covered in flammable oil, as well as having to maneuver through a tight maze composed of razor wire, she had to inflict pain on someone else rather than herself, making her success in itself much less impressive. However, she still displayed a strong resilience, able to think and act quickly and decisively, something that I think would work well in slashers and other high-paced horror movies. Due to this, and because we don't see much else from her in the film, I think she could justifiably go in a few different spots on the scale, but for now, I'm going to conservatively place her in B tier, with her strongest performances coming in zombie movies and her weakest performances coming in slow burn psychological movies. Next, we have Lawrence, an experienced surgeon. As is often the case in these videos, his occupation can certainly help him in other situations, particularly those where people aren't totally outmatched by monsters or ghouls or whatever else. If people end up learning about his status as a doctor, perhaps by him telling them, something he does do in this film,
What are you, a surgeon?
Yeah.
then he could certainly use it to his advantage to gain influence within the group. However, despite being a doctor, an occupation that suggests some intelligence, Lawrence showcases a difficulty in communication skills. At the beginning of the film, he doesn't really respond to Adam's confusion in a helpful way, calmly whispering instead of speaking clearly.
What does that smell?
Shh. Hang on a second.
He is, however, quick to tell Adam his name,
My name is Lawrence Gordon. I'm a doctor.
revealing potentially valuable information a bit too quickly for my liking. Of course, willingly offering information can establish a foundation of trust, but such information can also be used against you. However, since he told Adam something fairly benign in his name, a piece of information Adam likely wouldn't have any way of manipulating while still in that room, I don't think it was a bad move in the moment, especially because he was also able to convince Adam to do the same and to cooperate with him throughout the rest of the film, illustrating that while his communication and persuasive skills were initially fairly poor, they ended up being pretty effective. Lawrence is also observant, noticing the details in his surroundings and even making inferences as to how they apply to his situation.
That clock.
What about it?
It's brand new.
So?
Somebody obviously wanted us to know the time.
Additionally, he shows resourcefulness, telling Adam to use his shirt to get the tape player when he couldn't reach it with his hands,
Use your shirt.
giving me confidence that he can find unorthodox solutions to problems. However, his throwing technique is a bit poor.
I'm not gonna risk breaking it. You throw me your tape.
Like, dude, Adam just told you he doesn't want to break the player, and your response is to throw it like this? Unfortunately, as I feared, he may be too quick to reveal information, telling Adam that he was suspected as the Jigsaw Killer, even after Adam had heard his tape that said Lawrence was supposed to kill Adam,
Your aim in this game is to kill Adam.
which would likely only make Adam more suspicious of him than he already was, lowering the odds that Adam would want to cooperate with Lawrence.
How do I know you're telling the truth? You could be the one who put me in this room!
Throughout their time in captivity, both Adam and Lawrence are under surveillance, making it difficult to do any sort of trickery or manipulation. To combat this, Lawrence turns off the lights and whispers a plan for Adam to fake his death so the person behind the camera will think that he died. This shows Lawrence's adaptability and strategic planning, something that could prove useful in similarly complex horror movies. However, it also shows his unwillingness to kill, at least with regards to someone like Adam. Had he simply poisoned Adam rather than pretending to do so, he'd have been much more likely to survive, at least based on the information that he'd been given. So his decision deciding not to poison him makes me think that he'll willingly hinder his own chances of survival if it conflicts with his morality. Additionally, his emotions can get away from him, especially at the end of the film when he realizes that his family is in danger.
My family needs me!
Now, I know he was under a lot of pressure, but man just started screaming.
No!
He becomes so desperate to escape that he actually ends up cutting off his own foot, only to proceed to shoot Adam with intent to kill, showing that when pushed far enough, he will take that step, making me much more confident in his ability to survive other horror movies. However, it seemed to take him far too long to reach this point, and he may have only done it under the threat of his family, something that won't always be present. In many situations, he'd have died before being pushed far enough to make such tough decisions. With that said, Lawrence has many strengths and few real weaknesses. His intelligence can help him analyze things, and his tenacity can allow him to push through many of the difficulties he may face. All in all, I'm putting Lawrence in A tier, with his strongest performances coming in survival horror movies and his weakest performances coming in creature features. There are basically two versions of Detective Tapp. The one before his partner Detective Singh dies, and the one after. Before he dies, he has a sense of charisma and control. He seems well put together, with strong observational skills that allow him to catch small details, including those in Amanda's Jigsaw video, which he then uses to find Jigsaw's hideout. It does worry me though how long it seems to take him to find these details. Yes, they were easy to miss, but many times you'll have to notice things quickly. You won't always have time to sit down and carefully examine your surroundings at your own pace. After he finds Jigsaw's hideout, Tapp and Singh get the jump on Jigsaw, but after Jigsaw tries to kill a man, Tapp puts a gun to the back of his head instead of arresting him, something that seems a lot safer. To be fair though, he may not have had handcuffs at the time, but unfortunately, this would only make me negatively view his preparation skills since he expected, or at least should have expected, the possibility that he'd encounter Jigsaw himself before he even arrived at this place, and therefore should have planned to apprehend him, meaning he should have brought handcuffs. After he fails to restrain him, Singh fires his weapon, and Tapp gets distracted and takes his eyes off Jigsaw. Now, it's perfectly reasonable to look up when you hear but he stays distracted too long, especially while he has an unrestrained perpetrator 2 feet in front of him, and as a result, gets his throat slit. If I'm being honest though, he really should have anticipated this attack once he heard Jigsaw spewing so much psychopathic vigilante nonsense.
Yes, I'm sick, officer. Sick of people who don't appreciate their blessings. Sick of those who scoff at the suffering of others.
Who does he think he is? Rorschach? The Punisher? Now, throughout much of the first part of the film, Tapp fixates on Lawrence, incorrectly thinking he is Jigsaw, which could set a bad precedent for his performance in other films, especially ones that have red herrings like Saw does. I could easily see him falling for plot twists in other films as well, after focusing so heavily on one path that he ignores any new information and doesn't see that he was wrong. When he gets to Jigsaw's place, he hears him speak in person, but since he had also heard Lawrence speak, how could he have thought that they were the same person when they sounded so clearly different? Perhaps he considered them as partners or something, but this could be a huge and almost irredeemable mistake that likely stems from his inability to consider other options once he's honed in on any particular one. When ranking Tapp, I have to look at him in 2 halves. Before Detective Singh dies, Tapp has the skill set to do decently well in most horror movies. Now, I don't think he'd perform exceptionally in any particular setting, but I also think he'd rarely perform very poorly. With what we see, he seems capable of assessing his situation for optimal performance, but also seems to get distracted easily and fixates too heavily on certain ideas, even with insignificant evidence, which could certainly get him killed in some scenarios. I'd put this version of Tapp in C tier. After his partner dies though, Tapp goes off the deep end and becomes mentally unstable.
I'm gonna close this case. Right, close it. Right, see? Right? We're gonna close this scene.
Focusing even more heavily on Lawrence than he did before, and showing how heavily traumatic events can impact his decision making.
Broke down after his partner was killed. That didn't stop him from harassing me. The guy became obsessed.
If any of his other personality traits were similarly affected by Singh's death, then Tap becomes even less capable. He never really seemed to have strong fighting skills, but since he gets killed by Zepp, I'm sure he doesn't. So I wouldn't have much faith in him during any physical confrontation. With that said, I'd put this version in D tier. Overall though, I'd index more to his performance in the first half, since his partner won't always die in other horror scenarios, so he may not have such a drastic shift in his personality. For these reasons, I'm putting Tap in C tier, with his strongest performances coming in psychological horror movies and his weakest performances coming in action horror movies. Finally, we have Zepp, Mr. Creepy.
Good night, little girl.
Now look, I know Jigsaw kind of forced you to do this, but he didn't force you to do that. That's just you being weird. Stop it. Now, Zepp is a bit tricky. I don't normally rank the villains in these videos because I want to assess how certain characters would fare if they were placed into other horror scenarios. Scenarios that tend to be created by the villain. And villains tend to be so drastically different from the victims in terms of their role, their mentality, the way they operate, that it would be too hypothetical and uncertain to try to place them in these situations as well. I mean, what would Jigsaw even do in A Nightmare on Elm Street? I feel like he would just team up with Freddy and try to test people in their dreams. Like, come on, man. Their entire dynamic and mentality would change pretty much entirely. However, Zepp is both a villain and a victim. The whole twist of the film is that he is not actually the Jigsaw Killer, so despite presenting an obstacle for the other characters, his actions will still be judged. Now, since we really only see Zepp as the villain threatening Lawrence's family, we don't have as clear of an idea how he'd respond to more immediate pressure like we do with most of the other characters. Early in the film, Zepp seems to have gotten to know Jigsaw.
His name is John.
Okay. Now, while it initially seems like they had an amicable relationship, with Zepp telling Lawrence that John is a very interesting person,
He's a very interesting person.
Zepp still ends up as one of Jigsaw's victims, forced to either die or kill a mother and daughter if another man fails some task. The question is why? Was he so annoying that Jigsaw felt the need to poison him under the guise of survival, or was he just another unjustified victim of Jigsaw's God complex? Maybe it's both. Regardless, Zepp seems to successfully complete nearly all of Jigsaw's demands, illustrating that his morality would likely not be an issue for him, considering that he would have killed a kid for the antidote to the poison coursing through his veins. This bodes well for him in any situation that requires or incentivizes morally gray decisions. Unfortunately, his actual competence throughout the film is rather unremarkable. As I mentioned earlier, Allie escapes the restraints he places on her, which could hint at his laziness or inattentiveness. Something that seems to come up more than once, such as when he gets overpowered by Allie when he is distracted by the phone. Now, I would applaud him for successfully fending off Detective Tapp a bit later in the film, but this seems like an exception, seeing as he had already lost to Allie and would then proceed to lose to a man who had just cut off his own leg and another man who had just been shot while still chained to a wall. Oh, and did I mention Zepp had a gun? Like, dude, you had all the advantages and still couldn't pull through. Get out of here. After such a poor performance, I have little confidence in his physical abilities, and since he showed almost no ingenuity or any significant mental advantages, I'd say he belongs in D tier, with his strongest performances coming in post-apocalyptic horror movies and his weakest performances coming in action horror movies. Now it's time to give out the awards. Well, one award and one whatever the opposite of an award is. First off, the Ultimate Survivor Award goes to the character most likely to survive a random horror movie, and I'm giving it to Lawrence. While there wasn't as much separation between the best and the worst as there often is, I felt that he clearly separated himself from the rest of the pack with his medical knowledge, attention to detail, and willpower. I think he'd perform very well in a wide array of contexts, giving him a great deal of versatility that none of the other characters can really match. With all that said, Lawrence is the ultimate survivor. The first kill award goes to the character least likely to survive a random horror movie, and this was much less difficult. While no one here was absolutely terrible, falling into F tier, one character stood out as worse than the rest, offering nothing truly exceptional, merely scraping by with much of his skill set. Come on, you know who it is. Zepp is the first kill. But that's it. The average ranking for this cast was B tier, a fairly strong collection of characters. Despite all the parodies and sequels that mostly lost the essence of the original, Saw still holds up almost 20 years later. Thanks for watching.